Welcome to Sandbox and Chill, your interview podcast that will search the barren salt sea for fabled podcasts, and that will bring back the waters of creativity. Today we are boarded by Join the Party podcast, who will be talking about podcasting and the long voyage their crew has been on. So hoist your anchors and unfurl your sails. We're off to join the party.
So anything
Beautiful.
else you want to share? Yeah.
My name is Julie Schaffini, she, her, and I am one of the players and a co-host on Join the Party, as well as Spirits Podcast, which is a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore.
I am Eric Silver, pronouns he, him. I can dunk a basketball, and I'm the best DM in podcasting, as the DM of Join the Party.
Mine should have been more definitive now, I feel like.
You can do a fun fact.
You
I
can-
can do
No,
another
it's
fun
okay.
fact.
You can do
It's
it again.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
It's
I'm
like,
good.
Hey, I'm Eric Silver. I performed at the Apollo Theater, and I'm coming to your town this Sunday at the Bangor Main Pavilion.
Yeah. I knew you
We'll
gotta
have
be
a meet and
fighting
greet
Ricky
after
the
the show.
Steamboat.
That's true. Those three
Only
true
one of those
truths and a
facts is
lie.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just initial warm-up questions was, what did you think of the D&D movie? I mean, I saw your most recent stream where you talked about it a little bit, but yeah.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to say the things about the movie first, and then we can get on like what bothers me so deeply about it.
Yeah.
So the first thing is like, okay, it was a 6 out of 10, right?
I'd
You
say
s-
5 out of 10, but yeah,
Fi- yeah.
solid.
That's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, I guess
Middling.
I like comedy action movies more than you.
No, I do like those things, but also I felt like I got dropped into the middle of an IP that I didn't know, even though I've been playing D&D for like close to half a decade.
So okay, yeah. So this is where I wanted to say that first. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
dude. If you have Chris Pine and Hugh Grant and Michelle Rodriguez and Justice Smith and the guy and John Francis Daly directing it with a $150 million budget,
And the
Yeah, it's
hot
gonna
guy
be-
from Bridgerton, come on.
Oh yeah, that was
Sorry.
my favorite
Please.
part.
he's that
Yeah.
too. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be funny. It's gonna be good on the
Yeah.
good, lowercase g good, right?
Yes.
The thing. Also, Amanda walked out. She walked
Amanda
out
did
in the
walk
middle,
out,
in the
though.
middle of the movie.
Mhm.
She was reading on her phone like a quarter of the way in, and I'm like, just go. It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. And I
I
didn't.
will say
pay
the
for it
practical
also.
effects were fun and good.
I thought some of them looked like
Yeah.
furries.
Well, yes, the one tabaxi woman
Yeah.
looked like a furry, but like the Dragonborns and the Aarakocras looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they also looked like furries.
Okay, fair enough.
And
Yeah.
they also
Hey, man,
all the dwarves
fair
had
enough.
like Harry Potter movie dwarves. How
Mm,
like it was done with a trick of the shot, like the
Mhm.
trick of the eye, like that.
yeah.
Okay, but here's the thing that bothered me the most. When you saw based on Hasbro's Dungeons and Dragons, I wanted to rip a chair out because first of all, no, it wasn't. The thing I've been trying to think of the words to describe this, and then I remembered I picked up this history of TSR a little while ago. It's called Slaying the Dragon. It's a fine book. It's kind of like a pop science read of like the history of TSR and Wizard of the Coast, the people who created the company that was created around Gary Gygax from the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like thinking about why this bothered me so much. It's imagine sending a letter to yourself. You know how that's supposed to like soft copyright an idea you have?
Right.
This is almost like Hasbro sent a letter to themselves saying, we have IP. This is now a franchise. And it
Sure.
wasn't that, and the IP is not Dungeons and Dragons. It is the Forgotten Realms. And I've been thinking about this so much because the Forgotten Realms is not, it's a setting that got published into by this games publisher, by TSR. Remember, like the games and these settings, much like games and settings now, are totally different. You buy a settings book, but you need to have had the games book already. Like a TSR was a publisher. They published game books and they published fantasy novels, which greatly outsold the games, especially
Yeah.
in the 80s, especially when they were like almost bankrupt and then got bought up by Wizard of the Coast in the first place. So it is
Yeah.
in fact this IP. The Forgotten Realms was a setting run by this guy named Ed Greenwood starting in 1967. He sent in stuff to Dragon Magazine, which was like a zine they had out
That's
of
the coolest
like from a
magazine name.
I know, of course. Well, it's from TSR, so of course it was like the Dragon magazine,
Hell
and he
yeah.
was sending stuff in, and then this guy who was responsible for like making TSR, like everyone was like, oh, then we should make this a business. Jeff Grubb, who is like a very well known guy who worked on the beginnings of like AD&D, were like, hey, this guy keeps sending letters in. We should try to buy that from him, and they did. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they started publishing books, and R.A. Salvatore started writing novels about it, and those got on the New York Times bestseller list, and that's why it got popular. Not because of the IP or anything the company did, TSR, or Wizard of the Coast that bought a struggling, bankrupt company. It's just a guy's setting. And that's what the movie's based on. It's not based on Dungeons and Dragons.
No.
That's why it felt like they were trying to start a new Lord of the Rings. Because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Hasbro is very open about this is what their business strategy is.
Yeah.
Because they keep saying it at their shareholders meetings.
We are Marvel. Yeah.
They really
explicit-
want to be Marvel.
Yeah.
They're explicit. They don't want to publish books anymore. That's the whole thing around 1D&D. Why they were trying to make it a games of service before everyone started yelling at them, saying that's incredibly fucked up. They explicitly in quarterly. I think it was at the 2022 annual or the fourth quarter 2022 shareholders meeting or quarterly report or whatever. They said explicitly they are focusing on making content out of their IP, like similar to Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter movies. That's why they invested so much in. That's why they invested so much in the movie, because they think that that's the new that's the path to profitability. They don't want to be in the games business anymore because Hasbro wants to go on the fast track. The consumption of capitalism.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have it and make a game everyone loves. They want to crush everything, and they want to win, which apparently means making movies instead of caring about the game. The thing that bothers me is that D&D the game and D&D the company have nothing to do with each other. And yet, as demonstrated by this movie and everything else that Wizard of the Coast and Hasbro does, they want to make it inextricable, but the things that happen at my table and at this game has nothing to do with anything that happens in that building. Nothing. Barely, in the same way that my DNA is the same as a banana. That's how close they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good segue because you said your DNA and like a banana, and your most recent campaign, you have green folk.
There are people who are bananas.
There are
yes,
people
correct.
who are bananas.
Yes, we do have a banana guy. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, he's the captain of the guard for the Crags.
Yeah. For the current Kingdom of the Crags. Yeah.
Yeah, I have been enjoying listening to the entire this newest campaign. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to the second yet. Just because
they're good, they're fun.
Like, to
Can't
be
confirm.
fair,
Thanks, Julia.
Hey, I wasn't in the first one. I was barely in the first one, so can confirm it's good.
Yeah.
As an outsider.
yeah, just because y'all have been around for a long time. Casts have changed, but that's a good thing because I am so lucky to have be able to talk to you about kind of how you're giving a history of Wizards of the Coast and TSR and Hasbro, which I'm sure we could do a whole seminar on.
People have.
At this
Listen,
point.
you said that you have the financial chops
I do,
too.
yeah.
We could chop it up. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm going to try and talk to AJ Pickett, who has some very strong opinions about their books and purposely printing things in the books to push the digital aspect or digital PDFs. Like, oh man, we can't reprint that book for you, but we can redo the PDF for you like that. So, PDF and VTTs are way better than a printed thing. And that's a whole can of worms.
Or maybe just edit your stuff, man. Just edit your
let's
stuff
edit.
before you publish it. I don't
yeah.
know.
But that's where my question is going from the beginning of the podcast or when you started, definitely what are some of the most noticeable different things within the community that you have versus what it is now? Because, in I think I wrote down 2017, 18.
I can't even remember sometimes. It's 2017 or 2018.
2017, 18. The only thing that was really around was Roll20, and even then it was not good.
Yeah.
And
It's really funny I mean, again, you've activated another one of my trap cards, which is
You
like
need to stop, please.
I, Mirror Force. Yeah, I mean, it's an art form. The actual play space is an art form. And it's been really interesting watching it change. The funny thing about it is, like, can you imagine a show called Not Another D&D Podcast starting in 2018? Isn't that wild?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, just podcasts in general. It's interesting watching it rise and fall. And I mean, the fact that, like, this is Julian and my full-time jobs is working in podcasting.
Yeah.
That, like, you get to see how it all happens. I mean, Julia, from like an audio fiction perspective,
Mhm.
there's also like people understood you could tell stories in podcasts too.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we can go back to the age-old times of the radio play and knowing that, like, while that fell out of favor, it was never an art form that really died, but then was very much revitalized, especially in the Americas, as opposed to England, which has always had radio dramas pretty much forever since the war, the Great War.
Right.
Well, that one.
The second one.
Yeah.
They, like, podcasting really revitalized this idea of, like, oh, you can tell a story via recorded voice things and not need video and not need this. And also you could do it with not, no budget, but you could do it with a small budget. You could do it, it's accessible in that way that you can record it and certainly put it on the internet for not a lot of money.
Right. Yeah.
And so the idea that you can, one, tell stories, and two, do it with sound effects, do it with, like, fully realized audioscapes and stuff like that, is something that I am really grateful that the podcasting community really embraced as a whole. And, you look at something like, for me, the first actual play podcast that I listened to was The Adventure Zone, which is not sound designed, certainly, but it utilizes music in a really fantastic way. And taking that one step further and creating these spaces and using panning and using, like, echo and stuff like that is something that I think that our editor, Brandon, has done a fantastic job since the beginning. Like, you listen to that first episode of Campaign 1 and there you sound like you are in a dungeon for real. And that is something that I've always loved about the show, first as a fan and a creative consultant, and then as a player.
Yeah. I think that's so funny. I never thought about that of the Adventure Zone. Like, the two things people liked the most about it was, like, they were making jokes, and the second was the music. Because, like, Griffin McElroy was just plugging his computer into a keyboard and shredding away. I cannot understate how, and I know he didn't even write this, but, like, the theme song was absolutely banging of balance. And he really pulled everyone in. So I think that was the thing that really kicked off a lot of stuff, especially because Griffin McElroy, working at Polygon at the time, got an early copy of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So they were ready to play right when 5th edition D&D was out. So those two things were related.
Their first like, story arc is literally the Mines of Fandalore, which is, like, the thing you get in the first player's copy of 5th edition.
And he got
D&D.
it early. He got it early. So, like, they were playing Mines of Fandelver months before anyone else had it in their hands. So I think that that's also kind of interesting around, like, this. So the multiple things happen at the same time. Audio fiction, like Welcome to Night Vale, and the Bright Sessions, and other horror, and then the really sound design ones, like the horror ones, like the Black Tapes and Archive 81.
Limetown,
Yeah, Limetown specific. Yeah, for sure. Those were like, oh, we can sound design this. And then 5th edition and the Adventure Zone was cresting, while at the same time also people were watching Critical Role, the first iteration of it, being taught that talented people who did it for full time, like real actors were going to. It's funny, you see the seeds. The full-time actors were going to be doing actual play stuff. Yeah. And then since then, it's just there's so many different types of actual play now. Yeah. It's been funny seeing it. I think that the thing that we're moving towards now is something I'm calling, like, the LAification of the scene. That, like, the highest, the cream of the crop, the most popular region are all people who are actors full time, playing a rules light Dungeons and Dragons in LA on a set where they're all together And then that set, because they have one, there's some amount of budget behind it to film it or record it in a high quality way. Like, I wouldn't, not to say that, I mean, listen, we have microphones, like, but it's to say that, like, they have the microphones on a set and they're like, have makeup and all that stuff. So, and I think that that's so interesting. That's the thing that people are gravitating to. Like, they want celebrities to do it. And yet, because, like, it's something closer to long form improv. It's almost like there's a feeder system to, from, like, doing a UCB class going into actual play right now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, because, like, the big difference between audio fiction and what we're doing is between audio fiction and actual play is that there is no script and we have a game. The game is supposed to be the engine. We're not just improving necessarily. And I think that there are so many different types. Like, that's the popular mode right now of actual play, but there are still so many different ways you can do it, which is amplified by people playing different games. I mean, like, D&D can be as crunchy or squishy as you want it to be, but other games kind of fits more, like, you can play it to its fullest extent and also RP on top of it. So there's a lot of things happening at the same time in the space right now. So I think that's the main thing of, like, watching the art form develop from the seeds of podcasting, and now it's like a massive content, like, genre and artistic mode.
Yeah, there's definitely two parts to it, because there is, like, a push from I forget his name, but he is the owner of, like, Death Saves, and he's been on Critical Role, and he's one of the Jox Machina, and he's also I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I'm forgetting his name. Like,
the
I'm
actor?
terrible at people's names.
yeah, he's an actor.
Joe Manganiello.
Joe Manganiello. So there's definitely that push.
You should have just said True Blood or Magic Mike, and I would have gotten you there.
I mean, the only thing is I saw him once on Good Mythical Morning, and they asked him if a flail snail was a monster, and he said no. And I was like, man, if I was your DM, nothing but flail snails.
Even I know that, man. I've never even, we barely play with, like, D&D monsters in our campaigns. Even I know a flail snail's real.
Julia, can I tell you why you know that?
It's because you put it in the first campaign that we ever played. Yes, I know.
And you know what happened at the end of that session?
Was that the session that I cried?
That's the session you cried. One of the first games that I ever DM'd that we all played together, we were playing just some games of D&D before we ever got started with Join the Party, and I had to throw together a session because, like, someone couldn't make it, and I ended up doing this, like, just throwing the session together, and the end of it, Julia ended up crying for emotional reasons. And I'm like, hey, maybe I'm pretty good at this. Maybe
I've always been very into the RP aspect of D&D too, so, like, I got very into it, and I was like, my dad, and also this panther.
I know, this god panther, this is also my dad. No.
But that, okay, so to go back, and then I'll tie it to that too.
Sure.
Where to go off of your LA-fication of D&D, because people see that it is like a medium that you can make money, air quotes, off of.
Sure.
You see that push from companies like Death Saves and Joe Manganiello, thank you for the name, because, like, he's pushing his own virtual tabletop system, or it's an augmented reality system. And then you get this kind of false perspective of, like, you have to have this entire company behind you. You have to have everything perfectly made, versus kind of like when I was going through your, like, multitude page, where it's like you have set up, like, here is the starting equipment. You don't need $5,000 of gear. You need, like, a somewhat okay mic, learn how to use your space, and if you want to do video, figure out how to light your room.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, also...
Which...
The thing...
I'm going to tag on really quick, which is why there are, like, some podcasts, like, a new one that's come out, Pink Fohawk, that I really enjoy, is 80s Shadowrun. Yeah. And they just started up, you know, they're like, we have some background, but we're not a big production company, and they're making something that's, like, on par with some of the bigger names, and they've only been around, like, a year. Versus well,
it's also some of the bigger names just don't like to edit their shows, which I think that, you know, some people really dig that. Some people like a 3.5 hour to 4 hour episode. that's not my jam. I got ADHD. I don't have time for that. I'm going to be like refreshing and like scrolling back 30 minutes because I missed stuff if that's the case. I like a tightly edited podcast. And when you're putting so much effort into sound design, you should also be putting effort into your editing and making sure that it's a pleasant experience and there's not like 30-second pauses while someone tries to do math in their head, you know?
Yes.
That's my personal opinion about that. But
the thing on top of it, I think it demonstrates a hewing to the traditional modes of media, which I'm not really sure why we have to do. Like, the part of the LAification is you have to do it in LA with people who live in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, they're professional actors, so they are very talented, and like a lot of people love it. Brendan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer are incredibly talented, and so are Lou Wilson and like Anna Bria and Erika Ishii. They're all very incredibly talented. But that doesn't have anything to do with the production itself. Like, we are digital content creators. Why do we need to live in Los Angeles to do this thing? And I think that's the ethos of what we do at Multitude is like we're making stuff at various places around the country, and this is how you live and thrive as a digital creator. And I think that actual play as an extension of fiction podcasts is like, listen, fiction podcasts are not pilots for you to make movies. It is an art form and a medium unto itself, in the same way that an actual play should balance the RP and the game together, and you can do it from anywhere. And I think that's the most important thing. They all kind of hew together. Like, this is not to say that the most popular shows do not have incredible talent, but why do we have to do it in the same way that everyone says everything needs to know? Why do we need to make an actual play in the same way that we make a television show? I don't really understand why that is.
Yeah, because like LA, the whole reason that movies are there is because the weather's similar throughout the entire year. For an audio format, like why? You can be in
in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, why do you all need to be in the same place for that? Like, you don't. You certainly don't.
Minnesota and just be like, oh yeah, we're gonna roll some dice. That turned Irish.
That was your elf. That was pretty good.
I liked it. Yeah. Those are my favorite types of elves, the Midwestern ones.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna go hunting. But
that's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's fair. You just gotta do it. I'm realizing, just like, who cares about our accent types? You just gotta try.
Well,
you just gotta do your voice.
True. When I'm playing, it's very different than when I'm trying to interview and remember questions. Because I'm like, okay, next question I have is about Multitude. But yeah, and then I'm like, wait, no, shift into accent voice. We're just gonna do it right now. We're just gonna do the entire interview like this, and it'll be perfectly fine.
All right, love, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take out my gun, and then I'm going to answer your questions. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Eric just discovered that he can do, like, Jason Statham-esque, and he's been really breaking it out lately. Yeah.
You just start off by saying, all right, love, and then you just say what you want to say.
Yeah. It's all about the code word that gets you into the accent. It's all like, okay, what is the phrase that I'm going to activate this accent for? Yeah.
My go-to is In Bruges with Colin Farrell for when I want to do like a higher
classic.
Yeah, there's some lines in there that I use that I won't repeat, but like
fair.
But
fair.
If I ever lose that accent, I'm just like, okay, mic off. Okay, I'm back.
That's what editing's for. That sounds great.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
But so not only with like Join the Party podcast, but you also have Multitude, which is a wealth of information that I've just been like pouring through, which y'all have like contributed to. And if people don't know about it, I'm definitely going to put it in the links in the video, obviously. But like, how did that come about? And was it separate to the podcast? Like, which one came first, the podcast, or was it Multitude, or were they two confluence, like two ideas coming together and making a perfect little union there?
This is when I wish Amanda was on the podcast too.
I know.
Because Amanda's our brute force, our mastermind.
I got it.
Yeah.
We started the shows at various shows that were at the beginning of Multitude, like in 2016, 2017. That's Spirits is our oldest show, right? 2016?
Yep, that's us.
And then we started, I think 2017, because I'd known Brandon at my job for a little while after that. And we were a bunch of shows that were trying to come together and like lean on each other. The idea was like we had missed the jump. Like none of us, we had gotten out of college in 2012 and 2013 and be like, all right, where are the digital content jobs? And they're like, none of them exist. You're an idiot. They were never one at blogs. They were never one at YouTube channels. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And we're like, okay, so I guess we just got to all figure it out. We also missed like the cutoffs for working in podcasting, which was developing and blowing up at the time. That was like when Serial and Startup happened and Gimlet began, and we missed the cutoff for learning how to do this stuff because we, didn't get NPR internships and we weren't young. I had figured out I wanted to be in audio too late. The cutoff is 22, like a year outside of you're out of college, and I was like, oh, I totally missed it. So it's like, how do I
Eric, you
even
didn't
teach
pay
myself how
for
to?
your WNYC internship? I don't
No,
understand.
yeah, and like it's not even like I could have done that. I wasn't even allowed to get into SALT, like the one school that taught you how to podcast. I applied when I was still a teacher. I couldn't do it. So we had these shows, and then we're like, hey, we want to keep recommending each other. We want to tour. We want to We want to make more shows. It's like, why don't we kind of formalize a relationship? And that's how Multitude started. Multitude is now a podcast collective, which is at the center, a podcast studio, an ad sales provider. Because Amanda McLaughlin, my wife, but also our CEO and one of the players in Join the Party, decided she was going to sell ads for all of the shows because no one wanted to sell ads for us so we could actually start making money. And no one at like Patreon wanted to help us out on how to get this going. So, and trying to like gather steam. And from there, we decided that we were going to work together. All of us were going to own our own IPs from our shows, and we were going to still be able to like do these jobs, make other shows, but also run our shows and like promote each other and lean on each other. So we started a Slack. We got an office in 2019. We made some shows for Netflix and for Sony.
Sony.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
And we've just been doing it ever since. It's we weathered 2020. Which was just a wild time seeing every
We were also
single ad
lucky.
disappear.
Yeah, because we were ahead of the game. We were recording most of our shows remotely already. So
Yes.
while you like listen to some podcasts that came out in like the early pandemic and everyone's like, I'm in my closet right now and that's why it sounds so bad. Meanwhile, we were like, okay, well, your producers should know how to make your closet sound good, maybe? Question mark. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah,
so I felt
Brandon
very ahead of the game there.
Brandon moved to LA in February 2020. So he taught everyone how to remotely record themselves and how to make it going. It was wild how we just knew how to do it. And then people really stepped up with their Patreons, and we've just been we're going ever since. I mean, it's our full-time jobs doing this stuff. And a lot of the things that we learned by running Join the Party are the backbone of what we do at Multitude and what we do every single day. Sharing ideas and sharing knowledge is a big deal, which is why we write these articles and why there are a ton of them resources on podcasting and getting going in your own space are now for free on the Multitude website at multitude.productions/resources.
Right. Because I
plug.
Which it will definitely be there. I think that's because you hit actually a couple things that I see a lot of that I think are really good points to hit, where it's you working together with other podcasts, because I see there's a lot of tabletop podcasts that want to go alone. They want to fly their own sail and just set out on the sea by themselves, but there's only so far you can go when there's one person who's DMing, editing, posting, promoting, marketing.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. You really one of the first things I think that we learned in podcasting, both in Spirits and in Join the Party, was you need to figure out who's doing what tasks and don't be afraid of saying I'm not going to be good at this. Can someone who thinks they're going to do it better please do it? And figuring out, it's like proficiencies in D&D, right? It's like, okay, well, I have a proficiency in spreadsheets, so I'll handle the scheduling and stuff like that. You have a proficiency in social media, you'll handle that. It's very much Eric, you do a good analogy of balancing your party, right? Do you want to do that one?
Yeah. Running a business or running any sort of project is like having an adventuring party. You got to let the people do the things that they're good at, and then you need to back off and do the things you're good at. You wouldn't have your fighter try to heal someone, and you wouldn't have your wizard stand in the front. But I think the thing about all of us having to take terrible jobs when we got out of college is that we saw what would happen if we We saw what would happen if someone's just like, I don't know, you do it, or like you make decisions just because someone's privileged, or like reminds the boss of their son or something. And then how much that happens is like nothing in traditional offices are meted out by like merit. So if you're running a thing by yourself, you might as well let people help you and let them do the things that they're good at.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also I have a book off to the side, but there's what is it called again? I was just reading 48 Laws of Power, which also like does that, and that's also a really good point that you have, because that's having like also a business background where that's the mark of like good leadership. The reason you hire and have other people is because they have a skill you don't have. You don't want to hire yourself because you can only do one thing.
It's so funny how many people don't know that though.
Yeah.
Like they just want to hire their friends or hire someone who reminds them of that. I mean, I think that's multitude in so many ways. Like we just happened to assemble a group of people who all had different skills and ideas. I mean, Julia's incredibly smart and detail oriented, and is always like has just so much going on in her head all the time. You need someone who's ready to engage and to kind of like break the system and participate. And like Amanda is still the most business minded person in a room of podcasting people and the most artistic minded person in a room of business people, and that balance is incredibly helpful. We realized that like audio tech nerds are necessary for the future of podcasting. So that's why Brandon told us on how to record this stuff and taught us all how to edit and how to mix and to do it quickly and with the most amount of ability. And like, I come up with good ideas. I think I'm pretty good at that. And I love making them happen. So and listen, every single person in Multitude has a skill that we need. And that's how we just end up assembling our team.
Eric's downplaying how good he is. I don't know someone who can create a game in 30 minutes or less like Eric can, or like just have an idea and then like sit in a room for 30 minutes by himself and then a full-fledged like podcast comes out of it. It's wild. It's truly wild.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that.
See, with that, I would like to think that it's like Beautiful Mind. You're just sitting down with a piece of paper, and instead of math, it's just characters and dungeons and things expanding out and changing whatever.
Well, that's why I'm the best. That's why I'm the best DM in podcasting.
Yeah,
everyone knows that.
Because there's just an orange that talks like Jason Statham in his head constantly.
I don't know. I think I just I do it in the things that I know. I know how to make games. I know how to make people interested and hopefully to entertain them a little bit. And I understand on how to move story forward using these game mechanics. I don't know. It's just what I'm good at. It's just what I like to do.
Oh, hey there, sailor. You lost. Looks like you could use a little help finding your way back home. Well, don't worry. We got you. You can join our party as a deckhand or rigger. Do you mind cleaning the poop deck? Oh, no. Oh, what good are you? The least you could do is leave a like, comment, or a review of this, or join the party's podcast. And if you do, tell them old Captain Gravity sent you, instead of giving you over to Davy Jones's locker. Now get back to work.
Well, that's also one thing I like when I was listening to the podcast is, as much as I like, I'll use Vampire Masquerade as an example, because that one's always like, we're sexy Lothario vampires in LA, and we want to drink everyone's blood. And I'm
that's
like,
me,
okay.
That's me in Brooklyn. That's what I'm like out.
13-year-old Julia loved that, but...
Yeah, it's fun. You have 5 people doing it for 20 episodes. It's a lot. Yeah. Versus, my go-to characters and what I like to listen to is very much like what you're doing, where it's like, we're going to have fun. There's going to be some serious moments. But if someone is thrown overboard and they happen to, dissolve in water or something, that just happens. Yeah, or a spider that has 5 eyes missing and 3 that work.
That's Tessie the Storm. You're supposed you gotta stay. Baby. It's better off if you stayed home. That's her whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that whole thing was I thought was pretty well earned, and I think that it's not up to me necessarily of what happens next. The only thing I can do is put up a bunch of signs in places to be like, hey, here, this is what's going to happen. Like, if I don't foreshadow enough, that's my fault. If I surprise my players and then I can't, like, prove it later on, then, like, I did a bad job. So it's like, but then again, it doesn't super matter. They can also still come in like himbos and pretend that they didn't see anything, and then bing, bang, boom, it's fine. Because this pirate queen needs to be scary.
Right.
And I think that's how you earn it while doing other things at the same time. I mean, it really is balancing the game and the storytelling stuff at the same time. I mean, it's so funny about how the rise of the actual play has kind of been happening at the same time of like the rise of the indie video game and like storytelling blending storytelling elements with having fun is kind of at the whole core of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also why we don't have to go back to the D&D movie, but
please.
But why it also is kind of like doomed to be mediocre is because it's by a big company that just wants to protect its IP. It has to play the middle ground of safety versus indie games, indie podcasts, stories that can only be told by people who like aren't the middle ground.
Right.
You know.
And I mean, that's also going back a little bit further as well to talking about like how podcasting as a medium is more accessible than like television or movies or even like publishing to a certain extent, is like you get more diverse people making more interesting choices. And that is, I think, one of the biggest things for us, at least. I mean, our first campaign starts with a gay wedding. Like, it's a fantasy genre.
It's a gay royal wedding, Julia.
It's a gay royal wedding. I apologize. The two princes are getting married.
Yeah.
And, like, that's something that I know that you worked very hard at in campaign 2, especially, Eric. I know that, like, for me, having like a lot of gender representation in campaign 2 is big, which is why I chose to like play a non-binary character in Val. It's why I'm playing another like genderqueer character in campaign 3. And I just think like, because we are people who don't get to see ourselves in a lot of like television, film, and publishing and stuff like that, it's important to me to come and represent that and be like, hey, anytime I can like see another like non-binary person who's like, I relate so much to Val, that makes me extremely happy. And it makes me wish that like when I was 14, I had seen a character like that and realized, hey, like that's very relatable to me.
Yeah. It's something that, you know, we all wrestle with so much because, again, as money floods into the space, then it becomes, you know, we're running into the same traditional gatekeepers, to use as the only word I can think of, to be like, oh, no, we're going to do this, or we're going to make choices that's good for a bottom line in a different way. It's like, I thought the point of what we're doing is that we get to make it whatever we want. And being able to see it. I mean, we're saying it all the time in people who, you know, put themselves out there for content creation and then hit a glass ceiling, even though it will like further their career or something. And listen, I 100% sympathize, and I understand we're all out here trying to grind and do stuff, but it's hard. It's really hard, and I understand it. I think I also find it deeply frustrating because there's like, you know, no one cares about platforming Jewish content, and it's something that I care about deeply, and I'm going to keep doing it because no one else is going to do it. So
there's a reason that we have a joke that's not actually a joke, which is all of the NPCs and all of the campaigns are actually Jewish.
They're all Jewish unless explicitly otherwise, unless they're explicitly Italian and therefore they're Roman Catholic.
Yes, that is true. But also, like, there is a reason that we chose Join the Party as the name of the podcast, and it's because, like, especially, I know Amanda has talked about this a lot, where it's like she didn't feel welcome at the table, and she didn't feel like D&D or tabletop RPGs as a whole were a game for her when the podcast started. And that's why it was important to us that we were like creating a show that could teach people who are normally kind of barred from tables or not felt welcome at the table to sit down and be like, this is how you play and you deserve a spot here.
Yeah. One of the things that we did in our first episodes, we had a whiteboard that we wrote all the things that we shouldn't do while we did it. And one of them was like make jokes and references outside of the world. Because, you know, listen, even do you remember the Adventure Zone where you just had a bunch of Tom Baudettes? I still don't know who Tom Bodette is.
I still have to Google Tom Bodette
I
every
don't
time
know
I hear
who he
someone
is. I
mention
had to
him.
Google it.
I
yeah.
have no
Simply don't
idea.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like he did Motel 6 commercials.
Yeah, that was it. That was it.
Anyway, so it's like even these references, especially in 2017, I think that we are having different conversations now about like about representation, and there are plenty of shows that are crushing it, especially like Three Black Halflings, Transplanter, Asians Represent. They're incredible, and again, people are out there doing it in the way that they're doing it. I also say, as the head of creative at Multitude, like the thing you have to do is make your show unique. It has to have at least one thing that's different than everyone else, and everyone deserves the one thing that's different is getting a different type of person in there telling a story you've not a story you've seen before, but a type that you've seen before, but they're going to do it from their own perspective, 100%. But even in 2017, it wasn't even like straight cis white man was the nerd. The nerd was all that plus you were 35, you loved Star Wars and Star Trek. You didn't like comic books yet. That wasn't necessary.
Not
so
yet,
like,
not
and
yet.
you needed to have this like 80 like you had to read Ready Player One and understand all the references. Like you had to be Will Wheaton.
Yeah.
And if you weren't, then you wouldn't understand anything. Like that's the kind of specific person that was allowed to thrive. And like even then we were like someone needs to teach people how to play. And
we can't just assume everyone's been playing since they were 12.
Right, especially and you can't assume that like they got their hands on the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons book a few months early and they kind of and muddling your way through. Yeah, so that's where the show started.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the accessible part about like 5th edition versus older editions.
Yeah.
Is that level of like it is easy for people to understand, pick up, and play. It helps that there's a lot of great podcasts and shows out there that also, if you don't know it, you can watch them long enough and be like, I should be doing a strength check here.
I mean, like, I'll say it. We explicitly, in the first season, had episodes where it's like, if you're a beginner, listen to this specific type of episode. And Brandon was wonderful to edit in these sections where Amanda was like, we just talked about a strength saving throw. Here's what that is. Here's what you would do in order to use that in your campaign. All right, back to the episode.
It was like audio tutorial, like tooltips. Like, like in Breath of the Wild or in Tears of the Kingdom where like, oh, you just got a bow. Here's how you use that. It was like that, but with like the first 2 episodes of our Dungeons and Dragons camp, of our tabletop RPG. Sorry, it was like the first 2 episodes of our actual play.
So, like, rather than being like, okay, well, if I listen to enough of this, I can figure out eventually through context what a strength saving throw is. We stated explicitly so that people would understand and have the context that they needed to both enjoy it and when they started playing, which is kind of the point of the show, is like we want to encourage people to play tabletop RPGs. Then they would know how to get started. Yeah,
and we end up doing that all the time, especially when we wade into new games. Like we played Monster of the Week for the first time on mic. We all learned how to play together, which was wild. And running a campaign like that, it was totally different. And then seeing like changes we can make to D&D to like bring it into the 21st century certainly is what we ended up doing in campaign 3. And then just like any game that we ended up wading into, like we used a lot of one shots to kind of tell different types of stories. I might just like write a game and throw it in there.
Done that a couple times,
which is really fun. So it's like we're teaching people how tabletop RPGs, what they're for. You have fun and you tell a story, and then we get to record that, and that kind of fits into the larger story campaign that we're doing.
As you've done this from the start to now, and as you've gathered more of an audience, do you ever feel like the audience not necessarily dictates or tells you what they're wanting, but influences how you're now telling the stories? Or the content,
Julia?
Or the content
within them? I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. Like, whenever I am creating a character, whatever like choices that my character makes, we also record fairly in advance compared
Yeah.
to the episodes that we release, which I think also helps to not have the audience dictate the decisions that we make. Like, if I'm 6 episodes ahead and someone reacts a certain way to something I did 6 episodes ago, it's not like I could go back and change it if I really wanted to. There's a certain thing that's coming out in an episode that's coming out tomorrow where I'm looking at it now and being like, why did I make that decision?
True.
Why did I do that to
Absolutely
myself?
true.
And you know what? It's fine. But like, no, I don't think that our audience really dictates how we play the game. I think that, we attracted an audience that likes the way that we play and likes the character choices we make and all that. And I think that is like how you build your audience is you create a certain atmosphere where you want people to feel welcome and they are going to appreciate that and give that sort of feedback back to you. Yeah. So
we also do
I think that answered the question.
Yeah, no, for sure. We also do after parties.
Right.
It's something that we've been doing in our episodes for a very, very long time. Now we do them every 3 episodes where people can write in and ask us questions about stuff. And like it's an
And a lot of
opportunity-
times they'll be like, what were you thinking when you did that? And it
Yeah.
gives us the opportunity to explain to them like, oh, well, at the time I thought that this thing was going to happen. It didn't turn out that that was going to happen, but I was very motivated by that.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever done anything that was like crazy, that was detrimental. If something crazy or detrimental happened, I'd be like, let's not do this. And then and then we'll redo it.
Again, that's the beauty of editing is like
Yeah.
if any of us made a decision and like someone was like, hey, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. One, that's something that we can edit out and like do a retake of and like, talk it out as a table before we like approach it further. But also like we've been playing so long that we pretty much trust all of our like for the most part, our character choices. Every once in a while, Brandon will blow up a building with his Mad Bomber character, and I'll be like, Brandon, you knew that was going to happen, right? You knew that was going to happen when you threw a bomb at the ceiling?
Yeah, throw it at the ceiling. The rubble has to go somewhere, not down. Right?
Bless his heart, he doesn't understand how bombs work.
No, he doesn't. But but like, fine. Like, who cares? It's all call and response anyway. The whole point of what we're doing is call and response. So I'm fine. I've never felt like I've had that issue before either, because I always feel pretty justified in the things that we do. And I'm just happy to give it to them. And if they don't like it, they like it. They don't like it. It's fine. I mean, like, the end of campaign 2, we made some choices. And I'm not going to say anything about it, but I feel really good about it. Listen, we're in the same storytelling milieu. We are still a part of the tradition of storytelling. So, we get to make choices. We get to make interesting and fun choices about storytelling alongside that, which is always fun. Where I get to maybe I'll insert some narration that wasn't there when we played the game, because I think it will be more helpful for the audience to know something that happened off screen, or I'm going to give more context to something that I don't think was done on mic, but I ended up doing the players, so they didn't understand it. I mean, I'm performing for the players and they give stuff back to me, but it doesn't mean, and then the audience is going to enjoy it because they're the audience. They don't get to come on stage. Right? I think though we always remember that we're doing it for an audience, though. It's not, it isn't that like, what? Someone was listening?
Yeah.
Our audience is also lovely, so they are not. They really don't bother us all that much about that stuff. You're all wonderful.
Bless them.
From what I could see, it seems like that you have a really good or a really pleasant audience to interact with and be around, and
we like to think
kind
so.
of poke in and see how everything's going. But at what point, I think one of the things that a lot of podcasters, especially because I've been talking to a lot of newer podcasts, that they're always curious about is at what stage do you start, like how big does your community have to be to start doing like a Discord or Patreon, and it not be like a
Start as soon as you start the podcast.
Immediately.
Set yourself up for success.
Immediately.
Set yourself up to win.
Do you not want to be paid for your work?
Yeah.
Do you not want people to directly support you?
Exactly. Even if you make 3 episodes and then you let it go, maybe one person signs up for $5 a month and you still made some money,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, you should always set yourself up for success every single step of the way, 100%. You shouldn't just be like, oh, this is popular. Oh, maybe people should pay us for it. No,
Right.
people should be paying you from the beginning.
Yeah, that's how you
Bruh,
don't make money.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also
Yes.
it's also
so tell them.
I'm gonna
it's
snip
so
that and give it to a
wild.
podcast that I talk
That's
to.
fine. Do please. We
Yeah,
have
yeah.
articles.
Yeah.
I have explicitly have articles about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I
looking
think
at
the
it,
thing
yeah.
that also like there's a real survivorship bias
Mhm.
around this because the shows that get hit that are hits accidentally.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh man, we should probably have a Patreon. I wonder if people will pay for it. Like that's survivorship bias. Like we only think that you're allowed to be trepidatious because people who are successful didn't set them up for success and that happened they were first, right? Like the thing you have after someone was first, you need to carve out your own niche and then it becomes a lot of more work in a different way. And I think that's something that people then are like, oh, well, they didn't make a podcast. They didn't make a Patreon until 4 years in, until they already had 1 million downloads a month. I guess I should wait too until I'm popular enough. No, just do it.
Just do
Who
it. Yeah.
cares? Just do it.
It drives me wild. I think that like in terms of like especially like Patreon and stuff like that, I had something I was gonna say, just flew out of my brain.
Was
give me
about
one
the stuff
second.
you should do on your Patreon?
Oh, yes. So
Yeah.
we're currently doing our summer survey, right? And so a lot of times we'll ask people, be like, hey, you know, have you signed up for the Patreon? And people will say yes. And you ask them, hey, are there any like things that you want in terms of like rewards and tiers and stuff like that? And I would tell you 60 to 70% of the people are like, no, I don't even really care about the rewards. I just want to support you guys.
Yeah.
And that's wild.
Nice.
If someone likes your thing enough that they're gonna give you money, sometimes the reward doesn't matter. And I bet you that if you're putting your art out there, there's at least one person who would throw you a couple of dollars a month because they like your thing so much.
Can I tell you the thing that you should do then just to engage that? The thing you should do, the number one thing people should do on Patreon is either one, nothing. Just don't give any rewards. Just let them give you $5. But if you're going to give them something, just make a hangout version of your podcast.
Yeah.
Just make unedited, record for 30 more minutes where you talk about whatever and throw it up there. That's it. Then they have bonus content because they like hanging out with you. And if you think that you need to justify your existence to get extra money for even though you're giving out a free thing, then just make a hangout podcast. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild to
Easy.
me, Julia. We were just talking about how there are podcasts where I like the Patreon more than the actual feed.
Yeah, and I'm like, thank God that they release both a weekly episode and a weekly Patreon episode, because even if one's not good, the other one's probably good.
Yeah.
So it's like, just, you know, like Eric said, an extra 30 minutes on your recording time is probably not going to make or break you. And these people like you enough that they're paying money for your stuff. They probably do just want to hear you talk about the Italian taco place I took Eric to yesterday for 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, I could talk
Like,
about Tony's
that's it.
tacos for 45 minutes, Julia.
Exactly.
I could.
Exactly.
Well, and that's the thing I see, and I've talked to people about of, like, they are overthinking their Patreon. Like, I need to make this, like, you know, 100-page PDF that I release quarterly. It's like, that would be cool if you can do it.
That'd be cool if someone was paying you like $1,000 a month to do just that.
Yeah.
But like, listen, especially a Patreon, and especially for something that is usually as labor intensive as a tabletop RPG podcast or an actual play podcast. Listen,
Get
the
'em, Julia, tell
cost
'em.
benefit has to work in your favor. It just has to. You can't be doing so much work that you're like, wow, I'm not even making minimum wage for this thing that I'm doing. You just have to make it sustainable. You just have to make it sustainable, and you have to make it worth your time and effort.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
That's it.
So few shows, I mean, are massive hits. But it doesn't mean that you can't have like a devoted audience that will give you a decent amount of money every single month. Just make it sustainable. Make it worthwhile.
50
Especially because a
people-
lot of it's not your full-time job.
Yeah. Imagine 50 people give you $5 a month. That's $250. That's pretty good money for like a thing that you do for free, you know? Like,
Exactly.
that's not nothing.
And that's not even if down the road you do get moderately successful, where you can do
Exactly.
AdSense and all kinds of other fun things that supplement it.
Oh God! Oh no! We're gonna start talking about all this. It's just
Oh,
like it's
boy.
not. It's
Ads.
Yeah.
you can't even. People are just getting so far ahead of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yes.
either like, oh, I don't deserve any money, or like, I'm gonna be super famous someday, so I'm gonna save all of my Jones, my monies for when that happens. It's like.
Yeah.
I thought
Mhm.
we're all just digital creators. The
Mhm.
streamer and the podcaster and the blogger and the influencer and the TikToker are all the same, and the YouTube essayist are all the same. And someone tried to tell us, probably Hollywood, when they got the person famous enough that the thing they were doing was different than all of us. We're all trying to make a living
yeah.
making stuff. So let's just like let people pay us and do it in the best way we can.
Yes.
Mm.
The thing that I think also, I was thinking about this recently. If you went up to like every single person who worked on like the 1,000 most popular podcasts,
Mhm.
I think very little of them would say that their job is podcaster. And I think there's nothing
That's
wrong
true.
with that. That's fine because podcasts fit into people's lives in a different way, both on the creative side and also from the listener side. But so it's just do it, just put it out there, just do it and let people pay you.
Mhm.
And like
Yeah.
the job of audio professional is so specific. And also especially like professional done like D&D influencer, professional DM is also a very weird job that
Mhm.
also like requires you to like stand Wizards of the Coast. Like it's a different weird job. But also their jobs are also like, "Oh, I wish I was an actor. I wish this is to try to be a voice actor." It's
Mhm.
again, it's like we're just trying to put something out there to see if someone likes it. Putting yourself in this box doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like our TLDR for that is like, give yourself permission to succeed
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
from the beginning.
Yeah. That's
We did this
yeah.
with Join the Party. Also, the whole reason we wanted to do is like we wanted the show to be good from the first episode.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
had a job, and which is where I met Brandon. Of like, it was a job inside of a big company where like they pretended they were a startup and they were trying to like solve the podcast discovery problem by like making an app. This was in
Mhm.
2017.
Did it work?
No, it didn't.
Hey,
work,
Eric, did it
Joanne.
work?
It didn't work. No. And the thing is, so like we ended up doing a lot of manual recommendations, and one of the verticals I had were D&D podcasts because I was getting super into them at the time. I listened to so many first episodes of shows that were out in 2016, 2017, and 2018, and so many of them got like significantly better on episode 7.
Yeah.
Or episode 5. And like,
Yeah.
hey, you know when you're supposed to grab someone in a serialized story? The first episode. So it's like making it decent from the beginning. I'm not saying that we're not all like all of us are significantly better at what we do now
Mhm.
more than half a decade later, but I'm pretty happy. If I listened to episode 1, I know I would be pretty happy with the majority of the stuff that we did on like a technical level. Sound, like story development, character, like from the jump, characterization, just sound quality, and Brandon was sound designing that from the jump too. And also it was funny. I remember it was really funny. One of my favorite NPCs I made in episode 3, I think.
Mhm.
That's true.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the like that's true of even some of the most popular like actual plays out there. I think, in
Yes.
my opinion, at least. Like, I mostly recommend people skip the first like arc of Not Another D&D podcast. Same with Taz. Like, I'm just like, you can pick it up at Crystal Kingdom. Like, don't worry about it. Like, it's all good.
They re-edited the first
Did they?
episode of Taz. Yeah, because
Wow.
Yeah. So like, and a lot of people go back and do that.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Critical Role starts in the middle of one of their campaigns if you start with campaign 1.
With
Because they
very
were
rough
just like,
audio,
this is a campaign we've been doing for several years, and now we're just gonna start filming it.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, like Eric said, there's not a lot of shows that like just grab you in episode 1. And I think that if people out there are listening and are thinking of making an actual play podcast, make sure your first episode is good. Re-record some stuff if you really need to. Like, you know, do pickups. Like, make sure that you like everything that you're putting out there, and then put it out. And I think that's how you create an audience that cares about your thing, because you grab them from minute 1, episode 1.
Especially in the year of our Lord 2023.
Oh, yeah.
5 years after the show, not another D&D podcast began.
Well, and that's also like you've said it multiple times. Like, there's so many different podcasts out there and tabletop ones, and even as I like am trying to find and discern people to listen to, it's like, okay, is the first episode grabbing? It like, does it pull my attention, or do I have to, like you said, listen to the 7 episodes and they started getting all their issues ironed out?
Yeah,
it's still good.
It's like recommending someone an anime, and you're like, you just have to watch the first 3 seasons, and then it gets really good.
Yeah,
Eric's trying to recommend One Piece to me.
One Piece is good from the beginning. Do not. One Piece is good from the jump.
I was gonna say One Piece, so.
Luffy's a stretchy man who has friends from the beginning. The seeds are there.
He doesn't have friends from the beginning. I rewatched it recently.
He cares about friends. He cares. I don't like that kid, but he does care about him. Also, what's his name? The ninja shows up really early on.
Yeah,
like,
he's in
like episode 2.
Yeah. Yeah. The first one sucks though, Eric. Not gonna lie to you.
Whatever. I'm not gonna defend One Piece for you on here.
Yeah. Listen, I just recently started watching Inuyasha after like kind of remembering watching it as 12 years old, and I'm like, wow. I'm like fast forwarding through a lot of this. I'm like, just get to the where's the hot lady with the big boomerang? She doesn't come until the end of season 1. I'm just like, give me the hot lady with the boomerang. God.
Just watch it on like 1.5 speed to get to it.
Honestly, I just skip through all of the like action sequences and read the Wikipedia, and I'm like, all right, we got there.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd say though is that like a thing we can do here, which is like on so many other things, so many other serialized storytelling is like, at least what if your premise needs to stand out?
Mm-hmm.
Like, regardless of quality, it's also like, what are you doing that's different than what's out there? I don't know. No one should be trying to make the next Critical Role or Dimension 20 because you can't. That's already happened. You shouldn't be trying to like shoot for something that's already so far. What are you doing that's different? And I think that hopefully, if your first episode doesn't hit, which it should, and you're working on it, the premise will pull you through.
So you, again, hard transition. But you talked about like listening to podcasts, making sure episode 1 is set, but what is something that you would definitely suggest to podcasts about marketing themselves? Like how to get their name out there. They have a unique idea, they have a unique premise, they've edited episode 1 through 6 flawlessly, but they're like, okay, I can post it, but what should I do now?
Hey man, first off, what's your elevator pitch? We're talking about being able to market yourself appropriately and like making sure that your concept is on point and stands out. Like, what is your 1 to 2 sentence like summary of the show that is going to get people to click on it? That's the biggest thing. Is like, Eric, what's our campaign 3 elevator pitch?
Oh, it's a oh god, I was thinking about my answer to this question. It totally went out of my head. It's a pirate story set in a world of plant and bug people. It's like part One Piece, part Redwall with a little bit of plants and zombies thrown in as well.
Yeah. But to go off of that, find out what the best like social media that one you feel like you can handle yourself is. For us, like I know I run the Tumblr for us, but Eric handles all of the other social medias, and we really found our audience fairly quickly on Twitter. I would say was probably our biggest like pull in for people to be like, hey, this is a show that I like, and
podcasters were really out there in like 2018, podcast lovers really were out there in 2018, 2019, and 2020.
Nowadays, Twitter is a shit show. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on this. I'm so sorry.
It's perfectly fine. Just know if it's bad, I'll bleep it.
Wonderful.
With a flail snail.
Yes, perfect. It's a hellscape right now. So maybe Twitter is not the place for you. I'm sure that there's a lot of like actual play and also tabletop RPG creators that are probably thriving on TikTok. TikTok is not my jam, but I'm sure that there is like a way that you can start putting things out there. For us, we did our theme song for campaign 3, which was a sea shanty that Eric and Brandon collabed on, and then several of us also sang on, and that was like a real way to get people into the world and also be like, hey, this is a thing that you can now listen to. Like, not only is this a dope sea shanty, but there's also a whole world and campaign that you can listen to that is related to this.
Yeah. I think that also something that's kind of underrated is like trying to find a community of people, of like-minded creators. That was something that we did from the jump. It was like, sorry, that's something that we did from the jump. I mean, in terms of making the collective in the first place, but also like we were really close with a lot of audio fiction podcasts from there. And trying to like, find people to promote each other on. I learned that also from a lot of Twitch streamers. Like they always are on each other's channels and always doing challenges with each other. Like, be friends.
Right.
Reach out to other people who are like this. Not only because you want to have like an artistic community out there, but you want to like be able to promote each other and be like, oh my God, I love this. I want someone to feel like they understand me and be able to talk about me so that you're not just talking about yourself the whole time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that making friends online of like-minded creators is certainly easier than it's ever been. I'm just not sure about TikTok. I feel like TikTok is like the content creation app. Not that I just don't know how you build community with other people on there other than like making stitches and stuff. But that's because I'm also 32, so I don't know.
Yeah, like same. I'm 34, and when I watch more than 3 TikToks, my brain starts hurting.
Mood.
Because it's
So like go into other people's Discords. I mean, is Twitter, you still using Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff? I think Discords is the future of community building, and I think that finding like-minded people is the way to go.
100%. I also want to just piggyback off of that real quick, Eric, if I may, and say, do it genuinely, because people can tell when you just want to use them for promotion and stuff like that.
5,000%. I mean, you want to you're trying to make artistic friends more than anything else.
Yeah, you don't want to just be like, hey, oh, your thing seems really cool. Anyway, here's like a really awkward slide in of my own show that you should totally check out. No worries. Hope that's cool.
100%.
No,
I 100%
like
agree with that.
create like genuine connections. Reach out to people whose work you genuinely enjoy and see what they have to say in terms of both advice and like whether or not you guys can do cross promotion and stuff like that. Like, you don't want to be seen as someone who is just using other people to, take a step up the ladder. You know what I mean?
So many people are doing that if you come across as genuine, people will be like, oh, a real person. I love that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed before even reaching out is like, I'm going to listen to as many podcasts as I can. Check out all your stuff before I do it. And that way, when I sent the initial, like, I really liked your podcast, guys. Is because, like, no, you have a lot of really good points on Multitude, on your podcast, on the streams that either seeps in accidentally or on purpose. Like, Multitude is a very on purpose, like, not necessarily telling people to do things, but like, be honest, be genuine. And it's definitely the idea of like always give more than taking. Too. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is about Multitude is like, it's our full-time jobs, truly. Like, my Julia's now has newly come on as our community manager while also hosting Join the Party in Spirits. And like, I create 3 shows and I'm also the head of creative. Like, it's truly our full-time job. So all we want to do is make the space better. The thing is that like, big corporations are bad at media. They are. Like, I have friends who work in movies, and from all the stories that I hear from them, I have no idea how any movie gets made. I truly have no idea. It's so inefficient, and it's only propped up by the fact that like it needs to happen. So eventually it does by like some unseen force. But like, we've seen this in podcasting, we've seen it on like Twitch, like media, blogging, like media outlets, like magazines, websites. All these people are fumbling the bag because they care more about like making money than they do about like actual content creation and making money off of that. Like they're looking at it like a blog or Twitch or YouTube is like makes airplane parts. instead of like as a content hub. And I think that if you look at that, we can all survive by doing the thing that's best for us. And it's a good thing that everyone who's so big is so bad, because so then multitude can hang out. We're smart. We care about what we do, and we are able to when we're able to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this especially because Spotify just laid off 200 people today.
Yes, and then merged Gamelet and Parcast together, which is a wild
crazy.
concept.
Yeah.
Those are
and then,
very
and then plus,
different.
so different. And now it's all under. They don't exist anymore, Julia. It's just Spotify Studios now. Isn't that crazy? So the unions, both unions, don't exist anymore.
That's
because neither of them have a thing that exists. And then this, plus all the writer strike stuff. And also, like, we also produce a sports podcast for Defector, which is like worker owned, and it's also like another thriving business. Seeing them happen at the same time, it's like they exist and they're out there. I mean, we just saw this with Waypoint, now Remap coming out of the ashes. You're seeing a lot of independent video game media companies thriving out of people who like get laid off from IGN or Vice or Game Informer. Like that's a whole other genre that exists that I find deeply interesting. People like literally surviving off of Patreon so they can cover video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to MinMax. Shout out to Remap. Incredible.
Too sad sometimes though. Too sad.
I mean, at some point though, it's like I understand that sometimes it feels post-apocalyptic, but like, isn't the whole thing about post-apocalyptic stories that like people survive? Like, we're not dead. Like, the humans are there, and eventually it's gonna get rebuilt. I'd rather continue to be like a survivor that's like growing a tomato plant in the post-apocalypse. Like, obviously I wish the apocalypse didn't happen, but like I'm not throwing myself over to the zombies.
You're gonna be the guy in Waterworld who has the one tomato plant that then he plants on the one plot of land.
Yeah, that's me.
You're gonna be Eric. You're Nick Offerman in The Last of Us. We get it. We got there.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me something from a recent stream of players having to make the trope of like a traumatic background.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I've thought about this a lot because I'm more of a fan of like, no, I have a very happy childhood, and the reason I'm going out adventuring is just because I want to see the world, and then bad stuff happens, and I want to go back home.
Yep.
But what is something that you would like advise players who are going into actual play podcasts when they're generating their background stories or their background?
Oh boy,
that's
such a hard question because it's such like a personal like choice, I feel like. And like obviously, hey man, your character does not have to have a traumatic background. Right. To be quite honest, my character did not have a traumatic background until Eric and I talked about it. I was like, well, maybe they did. Maybe that was the thing that happened. And then Eric was like, so what we're gonna do is you're gonna get. I feel like I'm giving.
I feel like you should have. I feel like you should have. Your character should have, though. I'm surprised.
Yeah. But like I went into it being like, no, I don't think this character like really like it's nothing like wrong necessarily. And then we talked more, and like I'm very much of the mindset of like I create the character, and then a lot of my background ends up being informed by play rather than me writing like a 5-page document about what their childhood was like and then what happened. I just need to know like how they got to where they are when we're starting the campaign. And then that's enough for me. So kind of creating this moment in play that we did was, what was that, Eric? Like 4 episodes into the
episode
podcast?
4. I really wanted to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't even planning on having a dramatic and traumatic backstory for my character.
I want to bust in as the DM really quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
However, though, I wouldn't say that all backgrounds need to be traumatic, but they should have something to hold on to. Why are you out adventuring?
You need a motivation.
It needs to have motivation. You have to have something going on. I wouldn't say that like, it was traumatic, right? But it was more like informative and dramatic than like straight trauma. It isn't
Right.
like my village burned down. It wasn't my village burned down and then I had to live on my own. And now I think, especially for what we're doing, I mean, I could talk about Vertistello a lot, but the whole
Yeah.
thing is that like the pirate story that's happening here is that this country is having a water crisis, and a Great Salt Sea was revealed 50 years ago, and there's like the only way to start the water again is by finding the infinite lake and a wish granting salmon, and everyone's gonna go look for it. And then people using that excuse to change their lives, become an adventurer, be a full-time pirate. Why do you become a pirate is a very important question that everyone needs to know the answer for in this campaign, even more so than anyone in a high fantasy campaign would say, why am I an adventurer?
Right.
And it doesn't have to be traumatic, but it certainly is dramatic, and it certainly informs everything you do and who you are in this precarious space.
Right. For me, the way that I feel like I kind of approached it, and Cammy is a extremely positive character.
Yes,
Cammy is the kind of person who will never say anything mean about anyone unless extremely like prompted to do so, right? And so I figured out that like, and again, this was something that I discovered through play, which is the reason that she's so like that is because something bad happened to her, and rather than let that bog her down for the rest of her life, instead she approaches everything with radical kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like you can have a traumatic background and you could, have a kind of a grim dark background, but that certainly doesn't mean you need to have a grim dark character as a response to that.
Yeah.
And I also I like the opposite is like kind of fun when played appropriately, which is like have a very grim dark character, but then only because they're like rebelling against very positive sunny like family that they're like, no man, like my life is really dark and mysterious, and like they got raised by like I'm thinking of Gorgug in Fantasy High, where it's just like the very happy gnomes that adopted him. Like
I
that
was
kind
thinking
of
about
thing.
the mall rat, a character from Unsleeping City 2, with that
Also very good.
with the giant sword. I love
Yes.
that guy so much.
Cody, yeah, Cody Walsh.
The thing that I would say more so is like, just give your DM something to hold on to, and I think that can come out. My biggest advice, and I realize this is only tangential, but this comes from this, is that if you're do world building games with your players and build the worlds out together, do not use A Quiet Year by Avery Alder. Do not use it. That's not what it's for. You're not going to get the thing you want. Avery Alder wanted the game to be the world you make to be ephemeral. That's the whole point of the game. But there are plenty of world building games, ones I've written and will link to, that will be linked to, but also like other ones out there that you can use as a basis for, or at least have a conversation about the themes and the ideas of what you're doing here, especially if you're making especially if you're making a land from scratch.
Ask your characters or ask your players questions about their characters in order to prompt them about like, hey, what's the deal with this? Or hey, like for example, one time you were walking through a forest and you stumbled across this, or you heard a story about this in a tavern. What was that story? What was that thing you stumbled across? And like allow them you want them to be invested in your world before you even start playing. And I think that Eric is extremely good about doing that when creating like campaigns and settings and stuff like that, and getting us really invested into it. Campaign 2, for instance, the game that we played, I got really invested in the fact that our town's resource was what I called mountain lobsters, but are like little crayfish or crawfish. And that like defined most of the campaign.
It did.
It super did. We have t-shirts and hats that have little crawfish on them.
Yes. Campaign 2 was the story of a small upstate New York town that got turned into like a metropolis because of like a new element that was created that gave people superpowers. But it was also like a clean energy element. So the thing that we made the story about turning like a small town into a big city. So we started with like a little nugget, and then we built like neighborhoods around it. And one of the questions was like, what's your local cuisine? And the thing was mountain lobsters, which we ended up, and then it became the baseball team name, the hockey team name. And then like there was a whole mythology around a big mountain lobster in Lake Champlain. There was a whole thing about it. So it's like one thing sets off so much, and it will inspire your players to give more back to you. When they can.
Yeah. And then that inspired my character to end up working at a pizza shop that sold mountain lobster pizza.
Right.
And like, it just like, you know, little choices can spiral into like big plot points. And I think that's like, again, if you work with your players to create your setting and create your campaign, they'll be more invested and like feel like they're involved in the world a lot more than just being like, okay, you know, session 1, you sit down and here's the entire world that I've built for you already that you have no say in the matter whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, even more so. I mean, that was directly related because Val worked at a pizza shop. It was in Little Italy. And then Little Italy as a neighborhood was incredibly important to like the fabric of the city. And then Val became like, it's a superhero story. So then Val became like the daredevil of this area. So like the responsibilities of that whole thing, it was all really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And it all came from that one choice.
And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't get to choose the like cuisine that the small town was famous for.
And you got the question of like, what is the cuisine that this place is for? I mean, that was really open. I like kind of had the premise, and then we played a lot of games to flesh that stuff out. For this one of something where I feel like I knew more of what was happening, like I wanted to have more of a set setting, but still, you know, so much was being created from the players about like there's like, you know, imagine building a country and then your players get to build their hometown.
Yeah.
That's what I think you can still do while still feeling like you have ownership over the world as a GM. I also want to give an incredible shout out to Friends at the Table that taught me how to play all of these other games. I think the play any other game crowd just wants you to expand your horizons of tabletop RPGs, which you should. I'm 1,000% on board with that.
Yeah.
And then you get to bring all of that to the storytelling you're doing. Listen, I still think that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is probably the best game to play on a general consensus of D&D, of actual plays. Like, obviously, I have so many caveats to that, but it's like, you know, I'm still bringing my game design sensibilities and everything I know from other games to this game, and being able to use that to tell the story that I want to tell. There's a game that they played at some point where like it's a GM-less game, and every player, like players, or it's like a lightly GM'd game where like the GM steers things forward, but like the players also have players, and like depending on where they're from or like in what environment their character is informed by, they control that entire like element of the world. Well, it's like, okay, well, your character is aquatic, so you control you tell me what happens in every single waterway. Your character is magical, so you tell me about how the arcane vibe of this entire world. Your character's from the forest, so you tell me about the flora and the fauna of this world. And I love that. And I think putting that in everyone's hands is the best way to do what actual play is supposed to do, which is tell a story by playing a game.
Yeah. And that's definitely one of the key takeaways is that D&D has always been collaborative. And I think not to keep dunking on the D&D movie, but that's why it's like, again, just gonna be mediocre because it's basically a DM telling you how they want the game to go.
Yeah.
It wasn't
a railroaded game.
Yeah, it wasn't based on Dungeons and Dragons the game. It was based on some other IP. It was based on the world, just so they could get Hugh Grant to say Neverwinter in his when he pretends he's high class, one of those characters. He said Neverwinter so many times in that movie.
They had to just hammer it home, you know, where are they at?
Neverwinter, bro.
Neverwinter. Yeah.
Neverwinter.
Well, weren't they? Or no, he said Baldur's Gate a lot for someone who wasn't in where he never saw Baldur's Gate. It was wild.
What is something that you would? I mean, we've done a lot of different advice, but what's something that you would give to someone who's thinking about making a podcast? Like your first go-to piece of advice.
Find the thing that makes you unique and make sure that you focus in on that. You know, like I don't want to call it opposition research, but do research on like the other types of shows that are similar to the one that you want to make and see what makes them unique and make sure that you're not doing the same thing as them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that like you need to treat podcasting like artistic practice.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
the show needs to come out every week. What are you doing to make sure that it comes out every week? What processes are you putting together to make sure you're not just like pulling something out of your brain at the last second and you want it so it has to come out every week and you want it to be the show that you want it to be. How are you going to make that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is your everything should flow in that direction. Every single person should do the thing they're good at, and everyone should be working towards the same like thesis. I think the thing that people
Mhm.
forget is when you're recording a podcast, there's a ton of people in the room. Sure, there's
Right.
everybody recording, but the audience is in the room. In that eventually it's going to get there, so you can't forget that they're there. But also the show needs to be in the room. The show needs to do its thing. And if the show doesn't do its thing, you're just pulling something out of your head every single recording session, and that's incredibly tiring. And that's why, like, again, that's why we think that the only people can do this are like professional actors and improvers and like comedians and stuff. It's like, no, you can
Mhm.
do it. You just give yourself some guardrails.
Yeah. Yeah. Creating structure, I think, is also really important. Like
Mhm.
creating just like an outline doc of like what you're going to make sure gets done in every episode, both on mic and off mic,
Right.
is one of the best ways to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, and that applies to all podcasts, not just
Oh, yeah.
actual play.
Yeah.
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 What was advice you got when you started that didn't work for you? People think it's like
no one
bad advice, but
helps.
like just
No one
Yeah.
gave me advice.
No one gave us
No,
advice.
there
We
are no
kinda just winged it
mentors.
at first.
No one
Yeah.
wanted to help us. We didn't have jobs. There were no mentors.
I
still
didn't know
don't have a
anyone in the
mentor.
industry. Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one, zero.
No one was really like posting like resources on how to make
Right.
a podcast other than like here's how you upload to an RSS feed and like use Libsyn, I guess. Like it was really nothing. There was really nothing out there at the time that we were creating things where it was like, yeah, here's how you do it.
Right.
Here's how you make cereal too. One, get a job at a public radio company. You didn't? Sorry. Sorry.
You don't work for NPR?
Yeah,
sorry.
no.
Tough luck, man. Tough luck.
Well, and that's the wild thing when just thinking about it. 5-6 years ago, nothing. Like
Yeah.
it was untouched. There, you could do whatever you wanted, and now just an explosion of talent and sometimes talent, and other times I don't understand why people are putting that.
Listen,
But
you
yeah.
can still do anything you want,
Yeah.
right? And there are more resources out there for anyone to do anything that they want.
Mhm.
But the thing is, like, yeah, we can be a little more picky now about the
Mhm.
shows that we listen to because there is quite a like plethora of options out there. So this goes back to the question you asked before
Mm.
in terms of advice, like you need to know what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. And it's not like just like, oh, I'm going to make the best show I possibly can make. And that's like going to make me stand out because it's not just about that anymore.
Yeah.
It's about like what makes you unique. Like it's not just good
Mhm.
enough to be good enough.
It's funny you say that because that's the exact thing that Mr. Beast says is I just want to make the best show. But it's like
Damn.
Yeah, but
The
he's
act-
lying.
he
the
is.
reason why
Yeah,
you know
he
how
is.
he like studied YouTubers.
Yeah.
His real speech pattern is now just YouTuber voice.
Yeah.
Like that's a lie. He
It is.
the best at optimizing his content to be exactly what people want from YouTube.
Yeah.
And what the algorithm wants from YouTube.
yeah.
Here's the thing, guys. I've never seen a single Mr. Beast thing.
I
so-
haven't either.
well-
He looks like a big he got bigged. Do you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Julia?
Yeah.
He got big,
got
yes. Like he
big.
was a child that eventually became an adult. Sure.
Yeah, like he went to a fortune teller and then became 25 after being 11.
I have
Right,
a
and then
Zoltar here in
he-
town that I can go and do that. I'm gonna.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then you just got to go play the big piano at
Yeah.
the store. I can't remember.
Yeah.
No,
That's
yeah.
F.A. Schwartz.
I bring it
F.A.
up.
Schwartz, thank
Yeah,
you.
the reason I bring it up is because I watched multiple interviews with his producer, who's actually a lot more fun to watch.
Hell
Sharing a lot of the same points that you're talking about. Like, yeah, that's not accurate. You know, you don't just make the best podcast. You're making, what is your elevator pitch? What is how are you hooking in the member or the person? Even Mr. Beast talking about like the first 1 minute of your video that people are gonna see before they click off has to grab them. Like, okay, that's
Yeah.
actual advice versus you just make the best villain and you keep doing the best thing.
Can I think what again, this is kind of like the survivorship bias
Yeah.
of like someone who is successful thinks the reason why they're successful is because I'm really good at this. So it's like, and that usually is not the case. There's at
Right,
least
no.
some element of luck involved, right? Like,
Right.
the Adventure Zone, they're all, those guys are funny.
Yeah.
Also, Griffin McElroy got the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons book before everyone else, so they were
Yeah.
able to get a jump on the competition, right?
Mhm.
And they were able to run that episode that people were excited about in their feed, which already was a very popular show. So there's a
Yeah,
lot
I was
of
gonna
things
say
happening.
we can't talk about the Adventure Zone without also mentioning that My Brother and Me existed and was popular.
Right. It was the
before
first.
they started
The first
show.
episode dropped in My Brother and Me, and now
Yeah.
and then you're off to the races, right?
Yeah.
And people were starting to know what D&D was, and the actual play form was rounding into shape, and they kicked it, and they like kicked off the gong, right, the starting bell. So like, I think it's a survivorship bias. Here's what I would say. I'm trying to think of the reason I was going to say it, because I got really into that. You should make the thing that you want to see out there, because all you need is a devoted group of listeners, and then you can make a living off of that. Make a Patreon from the jump, let them pay you, make your stuff, and then keep doing, and make sure your work goes towards the thing you want to see, and then it will feed itself and grow and develop and mature, and then you'll be able to be sustainable. Listen, we're not
You should
huge.
make a show that you like.
Yeah, we're not huge. We're just out here doing it. Multitude
Yeah.
and Join the Party and everything we do, we're just out here trying to make a living. And we're succeeding, but on the skin of our teeth, working our goddamn asses off.
Right.
Hell yeah.
Well, and that's why I was so excited that you all agreed to do an interview, because yeah, it's the same thing. I want to make something that I want to listen to, and even going back and listening to some of the things I haven't posted yet with the people I've talked to, I'm like, oh man, they're such great people to talk to, and just being able to like go to YouTube and do and be like, oh, here you go. Which I don't really have many other questions because I framed it out for about 2 hours.
No,
Plus,
that's all right.
you all did an amazing job answering questions. But what is something that
We're going to talk about Tony's tacos for another 30
I mean,
minutes.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay,
we
here we
could
go.
we could
That's
also
what
just
we
like
talked about.
derail the whole thing, and I could do a part 2 and 3 about Tony's Tacos, D&D
It was
movies, and other things. But what is like a goal? It sounds like you might have talked about it, but what is your like current goal you're striving towards, and then what's like a even longer term goal
Wow.
that you have?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like we're kind of at the goal before, right? It's kind of like I
Right.
feel like I'm playing on borrowed time. That like in my salaried job, I get to play and have this artistic outlet. Like I really do think that this is like my artistic outlet. Sure, like it's not my hobby, but we do other stuff, but it certainly is the most straight up creative thing I do.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy. That makes me really happy. I mean, I just wanted to grow. I'm also the best DM in podcasting, and I want more people to know that. So on some level, and I realize this isn't like a good goal because it's not sustainable and you can't measure it at all. I just want to join the party to keep growing, and I want also we're kind of like in a podcasting group, and I think that the people in like the tabletop RPG world don't know about us that much, even though like we're probably one of the biggest shows out there if you really looked at everyone's downloads. But like I think I just want us to keep growing, and I want people to see the good stuff that all of us are doing, like the wonderful gameplay and the incredible story, the incredible players that I have, and the editing and the sound design, and I want people to see the stuff I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, like that's 100% true. That's like what the goal always is. I think like personal goal wise, like I want like the character that I'm embodying to touch people in a way that changes them. I don't think the shut up. I don't think that's like
Cammy body pillow coming to the Join the Party merch store so soon.
Shut up. But I don't think it's egotistical to like want to, as someone who is putting out like this artistic thing out into the world. I want my character that I'm embodying to like means something to someone out there that's listening, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I've had people like message me saying that certainly about Val, my character from the last full campaign that we did. I got a couple messages about our Monster of the Week campaign character as well. Shout out Phoebe. I love that girl. It's
Phoebes.
just
Yeah.
me as a child. And I hope that Cammy is just as impactful in that way. And like, that's all I can hope for, is that like someone feels moved by the character and the choices that I'm making in a thing that is a fun time with my friends.
Well, and that's the beautiful part of making something and putting it out, is that
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be like this year, but like 20 years from now, some kid who's like, 14 listen to your podcast, and then they're 34 and they're like talking on someone's interview podcast, and like, who really inspired me? Join the Party podcast, and I thought their character was whatever, and then you find out about it.
And then I cry
And cry,
for like
yeah.
3 days straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
just like the
awesome.
Panther and my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be. Listen, that would be awesome. I also just like, I love doing these interviews. I love talking about
Yeah.
this stuff because it's
Yeah.
like, we have the artistic. I get to do the artistic practice all
Mhm.
the time with my friends and with Multitude and with Join the Party. But like, I just love talking about this stuff, and I want more people to hear. It's a really interesting thing. I treat the actual play form as like an artistic mode we're currently in, as an artistic form, and I care about it, and I want to just make sure that everyone knows there are different things you can do other than this like kind of narrative, squishy, improv based, wildly funny, but also wildly traumatic, wildly upsetting like version that's out there. It's a very specific type of thing, and we're just trying to get out there and let people know about the show. So like, I love going on this stuff. Like, hit me up. I'm around. Wizard of the Coast. If you want to fix your shit, I'm here. Also, you can hit me up. I know you hired Austin Walker. He talked about it with the Washington Post. Like, I'm here. If you want someone to tell you what's up, I'm here instead of just doing the same stuff. I'm out here.
I can put that in a short that was under a minute, and then I can just send it to him.
Do it, please.
Yeah.
Let him know.
I'm also here if you want to interview me, I guess.
Julia, don't make it sound like I'm not saying it about you too.
No, it's funny. I'm just teasing you.
She's like, hi, I'm Julia. I'm also here, and like, if you want me to come, I'll come too.
I like talking about D&D and tabletop RPGs too.
I like talking about it. It's good.
Yeah,
No,
it's kind of fun,
Oh man, I want to keep going. We can save it for another time.
Okay.
And the next time
We'll do the
yeah.
Tony's tacos, and then what else
Tony's
do you have?
Well, yeah, the other thing that I think would take way too long is with the kind of the fall of the OGL. It definitely feels like that there's like or not fall, but like
I do want to
adjusting
talk
his
about
microphone.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about this really.
That's all you, bro.
Quickly,
Go for
yeah.
it.
So like,
Yeah.
that stuff's really important to me, as
Yeah.
we talked about in the beginning. Like, I've been looking at the business stuff because Amanda used to work at a bank, and she taught me about like, you can look at all of this at like, these quarterly reports and the way that the company talks to their shareholders, where they're just fully mask off, being as blunt as possible. And like, we saw this coming, and like we said about the D&D movie, they're pivoting. They're not a games publisher anymore. They want to be an IP company, because Hasbro is seeing that the Dungeons and Dragons is and Magic the Gathering is their best IP. So they really are pivoting to working off of that. The whole thing with the OGL is wild. And like, I was with the group of people that pushed for that open letter. Mage Hand Mike from Mage Hand Press we're using their classes for campaign 3.
Yeah.
So I've known him for a little while, and I drafted that letter that eventually became the one that went everywhere. And it was wonderful working with all those folks, as someone who's just kind of on the outside, wanted to do what's best for these third party creators, but they don't get to own what other people make.
Right.
And like, then the backpedaling, the fact that one D&D isn't going to be games as service, is going to be 6th edition. The whole thing with like the influencer summit, where people tried to turn it into a union meeting and it didn't go anywhere because Wizard of the Coast was like, what is happening? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, it was so confusing that nothing happened. And then all the influencers were like, we're heroes. And we're like, and everyone else was like, what's happening? I don't understand what's going on. You got a free flight to Seattle and you're saying you're like a war hero? I don't get it. So there's just like, and then the Pinkertons thing, there's so much going on.
Yes. Oh yeah.
In 2023, in our relationship
I keep
with this
forgetting about
company.
the Pinkertons.
Yeah, with the company, and then it's just like, but that doesn't have anything to do with our lives. What we do, making third party content, running our actual play stuff is like that doesn't have anything to do with the game or the games that we play and what we do. And it's just like, I wish that people would see that they have value because they have fans and a community, and the big company wants that. They want you to capitulate for free and give it to them for free because they're the big company and you're the small guy. But you have the valuable thing because people like you. And throwing that all away just so you can get a free flight to Seattle, I don't think is really worth it. And like, how much more do we need to see from worker collective action that like the things that we do is important? And we shouldn't get pushed around by big corporations.
Because it also touches on the like writer strike and gig economy, and even like music to that degree has been like that for decades. Where I was originally going to go, but there's so many good points. And again, that could be another another whole other episode. Was just like, I love that it failed because more people are wanting to look at other IP or other stories like Call of Cthulhu, Fate, Monster of the Week, and so on. And it's completely also changing how people tell stories because those other systems are beautiful in their own way, where combat is not the focus. Storytelling is or problem solving and working with a group instead of, I am the min-maxed paladin who will destroy the beholder by myself with this magic blade, and it is my lawful duty to do so.
But then again, it's just like, we're just trying to have fun.
Character.
Yeah.
Let's just play a game where we have fun. Let's play a different game this time. But if you don't want to, that's also okay. I think it's also interesting seeing like people then seeing there's opportunity and blood in the water, like whatever Matt Colville's doing or whatever Darrington Press is doing with Critical Role, and then seeing like Pathfinder being like, oh, it's our time. Oh my God. Like, and then again, it's
Pathfinder again.
Companies jumping to try to get your dollars. And we have power as people who turn that into art and people who spend money on that stuff. And I just think that no one deserves your dollars. You should buy something because you want it. And you remember, all games are supposed to have fun. You don't have to just have one. You don't just need to do one. Especially if someone's
You have a podcast about that, right, Eric?
Yeah. No, I do have one. It's called Games and Feelings. It's an advice show about games. Especially if someone's going to send the Pinkertons after you. You don't have to give them your dollars, but you can certainly put on an eye patch and a tri-corner hat and keep playing the game. You know, like
Avast-G.
No one can own your game. No one can own a game.
No. Yeah.
Like do whatever, you know?
Yeah.
You're just a person. You're just a citizen. You don't have to give them $50 just because you want to play pretend with your friends.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, not until they're trying to make it a game
police haven't come yet.
Yeah. But with that, what I know we said at the beginning, but where can people find you if they want to reach out?
You go this time first, Eric.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm Eric Silver. I'm the best CM in podcasting. I hope you enjoyed me talking about this stuff. You can please listen to Join the Party. You can also listen to the two other shows that I produce, Games and Feelings, which is an advice show about games. We talk about, we take real advice questions and answer questions about video games, board games, tabletop games, escape rooms, sports, all that stuff. It's a lot of fun, and I do it with Jasper Cartwright, who you might know from Three Black Halflings, who's so much fun to be around. He is truly one of those people who like genuinely wants to hear what you have to say all the time. And I'm like,
He's the nicest
you're
guy.
such a good man. And also Tell Me About It, which is a game show run by a maniacal multi-billionaire trying to get you to prove that the thing you like is interesting and good. I show run that, and I come up with all the games, and I do it with Adol Rafai, who you might know from Hello from the Magic Tavern and Hey Riddle Riddle. That show is also really fun to do. And you can follow me on Twitter at L_Silvero, EL_SALVERO. It's my name if I was a Lucha Libre wrestler. I'm there on all my socials.
That's true. My name is Julie Shaffini. I'm also going to say, hey, listen to Join the Party. You could also listen to my podcast, Spirits, which is a boozy dive into mythology, legend, and folklore. Every week we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world through like a queer feminist lens. And you can also check out a podcast that I edit for Multitude, which is called The Queer Movie Podcast, where they dive into movies of all kinds, so long as they are queer. I just finished editing a episode on the first official queer Disney movie, Strange World.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's a wild one. It's a wild one, guys.
That's fun.
Not a very good movie, but hey,
No.
it is queer.
There are, and also plenty of wonderful shows over at Multitude. We are a beacon for our podcasts are beacons for people to share the things they love in an open-hearted way. But that doesn't mean we don't get to be critical about them. We have tons of shows about space and Dungeons and Dragons and mythology and games and all this kinds of stuff. So we hope you enjoy.
With that, that's where I'll go ahead, cut it, so we can stop recording if you want.
We did it.
Have you